Howdy ESSM 406. I always am telling students that when you start a unit in this class, you should start by reading what the assignment is. What the essay assignment is, the memo. Because that tells you what you need to know. And you should read with what you need to know in mind, instead of just reading and then looking at what you need to know. Because then you waste time. It may not be necessary to read every page of every reading. In fact, in this unit, I would say it's probably not necessary, but you need to figure out what you need to know. So let's go through what you're going to need to know to write this memo. The first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to identify your future outcome. I call it your desired future outcome for the policy area that you're studying, and explain why you want that outcome. So I was using the example of groundwater management, and I said that, well, maybe this thing about private property owners owning the groundwater that's below their land doesn't really make sense and doesn't really fit what the hydrology actually is. So you might say, if that's your issue, you might say, well, what I think we should be doing is we should be having community-based management. Or what I think we should be doing is we should be having some kind of cap and trade program. Or what I think we should be doing is having some kind of government regulation. Or I think they should follow the example of these water basins in Southern California that Eleanor Ostrom wrote about that you read in the last unit. Whatever, there's different options. But you have to tell me what it is you think they should be doing, and you have to say why. Now, why could be, I think that private property rights shouldn't be infringed. And that's a fundamental right of human beings. So I think even though this system may not make sense hydrologically, it makes sense politically. That might be your answer. Or you might say, well, I think this cap and trade program is going to be very effective. Well, tell me why. Tell me why you think the cap and trade program is going to be effective. Now, most of you are going to suggest that some change be made. And some of you are going to suggest no change. The system is working well the way it is. We shouldn't do anything else. Either way, someone has to make sure that happens. So if you think that private property rights should be maintained for these groundwater resources here in Texas, then you need to tell me who's going to make that happen. So the second item I ask you for is identify the actors whose action could contribute to achieving the future outcome, and explain why those actors are in the best position to achieve that goal. So maybe you'll say, well, to achieve this goal, I want there to be no change, and I think the property owners need to get together and fight for that, because other people obviously want change. Or you might say, well, the courts need to step in and impose this because this is what Texas law says. Or you might say, maybe the state legislature needs to step in, or maybe a community group should get organized. They should organize themselves to do this, right? So those are different options that you can think about. Now, in the reading, you're going to read about some different organizations that might do this. So you're going to read about government agencies playing positive roles and playing negative roles. You're going to read about regulatory enforcement, lawsuits, courts playing a role. And you're going to read about activists and researchers playing a role, something called action research. So there's many different entities out there that might play a role. And in fact, I teach a whole other class on changing natural resource policies. A few of you may be taking that class, so you might have some more ideas, in which case you're welcome to use them. The next thing I want to tell you about is what strategies have different actors used in the past to get where we are. Did they use this action research strategy? Did they follow a regulatory enforcement strategy? Did they self-organize? So every reading that I'm giving you, not every reading, almost every reading that I'm giving you, it will give an example of a different kind of strategy that's in use. And then I'm going to ask you, well, to get this future outcome, what strategy should they follow? So that's what the memo is about. And every reading is there to support that. Every reading that I'm giving you is an example of a different kind of strategy. Now, it may be that you pick up one of these readings and you say, gee, this really has the strategy that I think will work in my case. Well, in that case, you're in luck. You probably don't need to read the other readings very deeply. But you may want to read all of them and get a sense of what are the different political strategies that different kinds of actors are using. There's one other reading which I'm not going to talk about as an example of a political strategy, and that's the reading by Deborah Stone. It's from the last chapter of her excellent textbook, which I did not have you read the rest of. And it talks about how decisions are made. It talks about what I said in the last video, which is decisions are often not made based on rational decision making. They're made on other considerations, on political considerations. She's going to talk about what some of those considerations are, and you should read that reading because you need to have a sense of what those different possible considerations are.